Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News SSA RRB recipients with eligible children need to act by Wednesday to quickly add money to their automatic economic impact payment. IRS asks for help in the quote plus 500 push, end quote. Special alert for benefit recipients who didn't file a tax return and have dependents. IR 2020-76, April 20th, 2020, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today issued a special alert for several groups of federal benefit recipients to act by this Wednesday, April 22nd, if they didn't file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 and have dependents, so they can quickly receive the full amount of their economic impact payment. Their $1,200 payment will be issued soon, and in order to add the $500 per eligible child amount to these payments, the IRS needs the dependent information before the payments are issued. Otherwise, the payment at this time will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for the tax year 2020. So let me see if I can break that down here. The amount of the payment is typically $1,200, but if you have an eligible child, that can increase the payment amount by the $500. But if the IRS doesn't have that information about the eligible child, then you're going to be receiving the $1,200. Therefore, you're going to want to give the IRS the information in order to pick up that added $500. If this isn't done, if you're not able to give that information to the IRS in time, then of course they're going to just proceed forward with what they have, which is to process a check for $1,200 without having that information for the eligible child, and then you could still pick up the $500, but in order to do so, you would have to have a return filing for 2020. So in other words, if they don't have the information, they're only going to issue the $1,200, and if you want the other $500, then you're going to have to be issuing a return at that point in time. So what they're requesting here, of course, is for people that have an eligible child and the IRS doesn't have that information, for you to get that information by Wednesday. Back to the text. Following extensive work by the IRS and other government agencies, $1,200 automatic payments will be starting soon for those receiving Social Security, retirement, survivor or disability benefits, SSDI, railroad retirement benefits, supplemental security income, SSI, and veteran affairs beneficiaries who didn't file a tax return in the last 2 years. No addition is needed by these groups. They will automatically receive the $1,200 payment. So these are people that typically or may not have filed a tax return, but are getting these types of benefits, these types of government benefits, and therefore the IRS has information and they have payment information, so they should be able to process the $1,200 automatic payment with that information. But of course, they're going to be assuming, unless told otherwise, that it's one individual, therefore the payment would be at the $1,200, and it wouldn't include any qualifying child, because unless they have that information, which is what they're requesting in that situation here. Back to the text. For those benefit recipients with children who aren't required to file a tax return, an extra step is needed to quickly add the $500 per eligible child into their automatic payment of $1,200. So if you have an eligible child, then they might not have that information if you fall into one of these groups above, and that's what they're requesting here. Back to the text. For people in these groups who have a qualifying child and didn't file a 2018 or 2019 tax return, they have a limited window to register to have $500 per eligible child added automatically to their soon-to-be received $1,200 economic impact payment. A quick trip to the special non-filer tool, there's a link here, so that's the tool they're going to be using to provide them with this information, on irs.gov by noon Eastern Time, Wednesday, April 22nd, for some of these groups may help put all of their eligible economic impact payment into a single payment. So if you want to use, if you want the full payment, or if you fall into that group and you want that extra 500, then they're requesting that they use this tool, the special non-filer tool. There's a link to that here. I'll give a link to this site in the description. They want that done by Wednesday, April 22nd. Quote, "We want to plus $500 these recipients with children so they can get their maximum economic impact payment of $1,200 plus the $500 for each eligible child as quickly as possible," end quote, said IRS Commissioner Chuck Reddick. Quote, "They'll get $1,200 automatically, but they need to act quickly and register at irs.gov," that's the IRS website, irs.gov, "to get the extra $500 per child added to their payment. These groups don't normally have a return filing obligation and may not realize they qualify for a larger payment. We're asking people and organizations throughout the country to share this information widely and help the IRS with the plus $500 push," end quote. To help spread the word to recipients with children about the special, quote, plus $500 push, end quote, the IRS has additional material available on a special partners page. There's a link to that here. They can be shared with friends, family members, and community groups. This effort will focus on the initial April 22nd deadline and continue this spring to reach as many people as possible, since the child payments will continue to be made in the weeks and months ahead. Have a child but don't file a tax return? Visit irs.gov now. Those receiving a federal benefits, including Social Security retirement, survivor or disability benefits, SSDI, railroad retirement benefits, supplemental security income, SSI, or Veterans Administration benefits, who have with children and who aren't required to file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 should visit the non-filers interpayment information info here tool. So there's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description. It's on the IRS website at irs.gov. By quickly taking steps to enter information on the IRS website about them and their qualifying children, they can receive the $500 per dependent child payment automatically in addition to their $1,200 individual payment. Otherwise, their payment at this time will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a filing for the tax year 2020. So again, in other words, you'd basically get the $1,200 if you don't provide them with that added information about the qualifying child, to get the added $500 per qualifying child, and then you could still get the $500, but then you'd have to process the tax return in order to do so if you don't get them that information on time. Back to the text. First window affects SSA, RRB recipients with children. SSI and VA recipients have slightly more time to add the $500 to automatic payments. For certain SSA, RRB recipients who didn't normally file a tax return and do not register with the IRS by April 22nd, they will still be eligible to receive the separate payment of $500 per qualifying child. For those who missed the April 22nd deadline, their payment at this time will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. They will not be eligible to use the non-filer tool to add eligible children once their $1,200 payment has been issued. So in other words, you'd really like to get in there soon if you fall into this group, because you're not going to be able to use this kind of easier tool. It's supposed to be an easier tool than actually filing the tax return after the initial payment has been sent. So if they send out the $1,200 payment and you fall into this group, you can no longer use the non-filer tool and will then have to file an actual tax return, just an information return possibly if there's no, but you'll have to file the tax return in order to receive the $500. Back to the text. The SSI and VA beneficiaries have some additional time beyond the April 22nd to add their children, since their $1,200 automatic payment will be made at a later date. So if you fall into this group, SSI and VA, then you may have a little, you want to still get it done if you fall into that group by Wednesday, but you may have a little bit longer because apparently they're processing those checks, so those payments, a little bit later. So back to the text. SSI recipients will receive their automatic payments in early May, and the VA payment schedule for beneficiaries who receive compensation and pension (C&P) benefit payments is still being determined. If they have children and aren't required to file a tax return, both groups are urged to use the non-filer tool as soon as possible. Link to that here. Once their $1,200 payment has been issued, they will not be eligible to use the non-filer tool to add eligible children. Their payment will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. No action needed by most taxpayers. The Treasury Department will make these automatic payments to SSA, SSI, RRB, and VA recipients. Recipients will generally receive the automatic $1,200 payments by direct deposit, direct express deposit card, or by paper check, just as they would normally receive their benefits. So the general rule here is if you fall into this category and you don't have that added dependent child that could qualify for the added 500, you should be okay, and they should be able to process the information in a similar process that you have been receiving payments from these other payments. But if you fall into that group, then you're going to have to give them that more information in order to add the possible added 500 for the qualifying child. Back to the text. For information about Social Security retirement survivors and disability insurance beneficiaries, please visit the SSA website at ssa.gov. For more information related to the veterans and their beneficiaries who receive compensation and pension C&P benefit payments from the VA, please visit va.gov. General IRS information about the economic impact payments is available on special section of the irs.gov website. There's links to those items here. And then you can watch out for scams related to economic impact payments. Obviously, this is money going out in kind of an automatic fashion that's unusual at this point in time. So that confusion is going to be causing scammers to scam, to try to take advantage of that system. So you want to be more aware at this point in time. And just remember to always go back to the IRS website if you have any questions. If anybody's sending you anything in any kind of format, you got questions about it, go to the IRS website and as the source. Don't go from the email. If you're questionable about it, go to the source, go to the IRS, and then search do your research from there. Back to the text. The IRS urges taxpayers to be on the lookout for scams related to economic impact payments. There's no fee required to receive these payments.